Christians are no longer seen as the do-gooders in the culture. For some reason, we're starting to become seen as the do-badders, and no longer are Christians and Christianity seen as part of the cultural solution, but increasingly part of the cultural problem. Now, how do we get here? Look, the problem is simple, I think. The Christian views around sexuality and ethics around gender and all the things of human identity are now increasingly under the spotlight. They're seen as retrograde, and they're in direct conflict with the culture and the direction that it's taking. What was once considered, just de rigueur about what people thought about marriage and identity are now seen as outlying views that need to be left behind if we're going to move towards a more utopian ideal, not just seen as outdated issues, but actually quite dangerous. And since safety is one of the big issues in our culture at the moment, how can we be safe? Anything that can be pitched as dangerous is suddenly seen as bad.
Yeah, Steve, that's the question behind your latest book, which I know you're on here, but actually the secret is it's actually quite good. Which is high praise indeed. Actually, in American terms, it's brilliant, it's awesome, and in Scottish terms, it's okay, which means it's brilliant, it's awesome. The Bad Guys: How to Live for Jesus in a World That Says You Shouldn't. That's what we're going to look at this week. So, Steve, leaving yourself out of this, are Christians the bad guys? Why or why not?
Well, I wrote the title to be a little bit ironic, but it's a case that Christians are suddenly realizing that they thought themselves as part of the solution to where the culture was at, that we're in the public square, the marketplace of ideas, we'd be able to pitch our tent and everyone would be okay with that. But that's increasingly not the case. The Christian framework around sexual ethics is now seen as problematic. It's seen as oppressive, and it's seen that it's put minorities down in such a way that Christianity should now pay the cost of that, that the Christian framework has to be legally and politically hemmed off to allow safety and flourishing in our culture. And Christians are suddenly very discombobulated by that. When we're at Purple Day at work, or you go to university and in your class, you suddenly realize that to be a Christian is to be seen as the equivalent of a racist. That's the stage it's got to.
Yeah, or even, I mean, I remember once being in an online argument with a group of people, and I suggested, I said, you're almost treating me as though I'm nearly as bad as a pedophile. And someone actually said, no, you're probably worse just for being a Christian. So, I mean, there's always been opposition to Christianity, but what you've identified in your book is a particular thing tied in with the Christian sexual ethic as well, and was seen as being dangerous to people and so on. How did we get to this place?
Well, that's something I explore in my book, which I'll give another plug to, because the key issue for me is that who we are as human beings, the source and locus of our identity is very much in our sexual revolutionary culture, our sexuality and our gender. Those are our deepest identity places, according to popular culture, that you look within yourself to find true freedom. And your sexual identity issues, your gender, those are the places that you'll find your ultimate liberty. And in one sense, it's another gospel. The Christian gospel goes against that and says, that's not where our identity is found. In fact, we don't get to choose how we put those things together. God has put together the world in a world of order, and he's bringing things to a new creation. So there's a bit of broken stuff happening in the middle. But if you say that in our culture today, that's seen as offensive. Who you are sexually and who you are in terms of your gender, those are the places that are going to liberate you to be the best person you can be. That's what it's up against.
Yeah, have we made it harder for ourselves? I'm talking about Christians, obviously. Have we made it harder for ourselves?
Oh, undoubtedly. I think a couple of things. You'd have to say there's a bit of payback for some of the issues that the church has been involved in. And you'd have to say that the sexual abuse issue in the Catholic Church in particular has been a real body blow to religion in general and institutional religion. And so that has to be paid for. But also the fact that in one sense, we present bright, shiny, happy, hetero family as what church always looks like. And if you're not in that, you're kind of marginalized. If you are same-sex attracted and you want to live as a Christian, it can be quite lonely. But the same thing was true for divorced people 30 years ago in the church. It was a very lonely experience. So the church has to find ways to say, how do we, together as God's people, shape and help each other to be more like Jesus, not just isolate ourselves into silos, I suppose.
Yeah, and not just, I mean, because there's a sense in which this is nothing new. I mean, as one does, I'm just reading through the history of Theodoret from the 4th century. You know, that's just whatever floats your boat, you know. And I'm listening to Nick Cave as well, so it goes well. But I mean, he's complaining about bishops abusing their power, sexual immorality, adultery, and all the rest of it. So I think that's always been around. I think there's a tendency for us to be quite negative. But how do we show people that the Christian message is actually hopeful and hope-filled?
Yeah. Well, first thing first, it's always been around, but social media and the internet has ramped up the pace of which we see things and engage with things. Yeah. It's a much more hot environment in the public square. How do we go about changing or perception, I think, is we have to live such lives, I think, as God's people. We're told to live such lives among the pagans that though they malign us for what we're doing, they will glorify God on the day he visits us. There's got to be a tension in the way Christians live, that it looks different, it looks better, it's a better story, community story than what's on offer in the world. And I think it's true that it is. It's not as if the sexual revolution has spawned very, very happy people. We live in the Western world, which is riven with isolation, loneliness, worry, anxiety. All those things are across our culture at the moment, and a lot of them are tied to the individualism that we say was going to liberate us, but it's actually not liberated us the way we were told it would be.
Yeah, it's not liberated us. And we're finding that people are actually having less sex. That was the thing that really got me. You know, it's almost, there are so many difficulties and problems. Who should read your book?
Who should read my book? I wrote it specifically for people who are in churches, not necessarily for pastors, but pastors can read it, and pastoral teams, because I think the average person going to work or uni or school or in their friendship groups Monday to Friday is confronted with people who are their friends and are their work colleagues who are quite hostile to that Christian framework. And so they kind of self-censor and keep their heads down because they don't know how they should go forward in the workplace. How do I not look like a bigot? And I wanted to write it to encourage them that the gospel has a great story and a great hope, but also great joy. Being the bad guys isn't just about being stiff upper lip, being stoic, or even being grumpy. It's about when you are maligned, you are blessed. There's something what Jesus does, that he went to the cross as someone maligned, but it was reversed through the resurrection. Our hope's in that, I think. It's not in winning the culture war, for example.
Yeah, I mean, the Bible has this issue of being the bad guys. I mean, you weren't the first person to think of that. You know, the Bible was ahead of it. And actually, you know, isn't it the truth that almost everything we talk about, it's been here before? You know, there's nothing new under the sun. And I love what First Peter has to say. Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that's come to test you as though something strange were happening, but rejoice in as much as you participate in the sufferings of Christ, so that you may be overjoyed when his glory is revealed. If you're insulted because of the name of Christ, you're blessed, for the spirit of glory and of God rests on you. If you suffer, it should not be as a murderer or thief or any other kind of criminal, or even as a meddler. However, if you suffer as a Christian, do not be ashamed, but praise God that you bear that name. That's a pretty good way of summing up, isn't it?
It is. And part of that is just getting to know Jesus better and knowing him through the word and being enamored with what he's done for you, because that will actually liberate you from despair if you are seeing the world falling apart, or anger if someone has a crack at you because they think you're a bigot. Jesus did not revile and did not abuse, and he just entrusted himself to God. And that's what I think we should do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got, you have this idea, be the best bad guy you can be. It's like, if you're down with the kids and speak the lingo, man, you're wicked. That's wicked. Well, maybe we're bad. We're bad. George Thorogood, bad to the bone, but we're bad in the sense of we're rebelling against the society, but we're the goodest bad people that anyone will ever meet. That's what we should aim for. Don't you think?
That's exactly right. You've got to be repellently attractive, as I would put it.
Well, you're certainly not attractively repellent. That's all right. Listen, on that horrendous thought, we shall leave you until next week.
Thanks, bad guy.
See ya.